I dive in anyway. And we are now live. Welcome, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Editor here at criticalblast.com. And with us tonight, we have Ralph Tedesco. Am I saying that correctly?
That is correct. You got it.
I was say Ralph, but then, Rafe Fiennes entered the picture and just kind of screwed everything up.
Rafe. I like that. I like Rafe. It sounds more distinguished.
I used
but
to call
Ralph,
him Rafe, yes.
I've only had one person call me Rafe in my lifetime, so I guess we're going with Ralph.
All right. And you are the co-founder of Zenescope Comics, Zenescope Entertainment. Let's get the right name.
Zenescope Entertainment, correct.
And how long you guys been doing this? I know it's been a while.
15 years. This is our 15th year in business.
Great year to
2000
anniversary.
Yeah, it was the COVID year, our COVID anniversary.
Getting a little peckerish there. So this can't be an easy time for publishers. I don't imagine any year is really easy in comics these last 10 at the very least.
No, I mean, not. Comics is an interesting. It's an interesting industry in general. There's so many layers to it. So, to navigate success in comic books is very, very, those margins are very thin. I think now is a tough time. Obviously, for most companies, it's the success on the other side. It's the film and TV success that feeds the comic book success. For companies like DC or Marvel, I mean, to them, they're not, comic books don't make them anything, but it's the way for them to continue to put storylines and IP out.
So that way.
What's that?
They hold the trademark that way. They show continued use.
Yeah. So, I mean, every publisher is different. I just had a call with a publisher today, a friend of ours, of Joe and mine, from Arcana. They don't publish as much anymore, but they've been around. I don't know if you've heard of Arcana Comics. Sean called us to talk about it. He's in touch with the guys from Boom all the time. Ross over there, we all kind of, obviously we all know each other at some capacity on some level. And, we don't know what's going to happen with Diamond. The distribution model is very, now it's very, shaky.
Yeah, this whole COVID thing, if anything, it showed us that there is a serious bottleneck in the industry, that if that's gone, it topples the whole house of cards, and that would be Diamond distribution.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, Diamond's the only player in the game with distribution. So if you're going to have a comic book company, you need to be in Diamond. I think, there are some companies that might be better set up than others to distribute their own books if it comes to that. We have our own warehouse. We've been shipping product for, since we almost since we started. So it's not as tough of a transition if we have to make that fully. But it's still going to take, we hope that doesn't have to happen.
Right.
Whereas I think some publishers might not be set up that way, where they rely solely on Diamond for their distribution model. So, and then of course the stores, the comic book shops themselves, let's be honest, it's a tough market in general to keep a small mom and pop comic book store right now. And I think unfortunately we might see some of these guys going out of business if this doesn't get back going again.
And we already have with Lee's Comics in California. They closed up temporarily, and then they came out later with the statement that said that it was going to be a permanent closure. They were going strictly online.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, it's a razor-thin margin to operate on, and it's not just been a razor-thin margin, but we're seeing that the cash reserves for publishers like DC, they had to issue the pencils down statement. Say, hey, we're not putting any books out. And Diamond now has, not now, but last week came out with the statement that they're going to be paying you guys on a percentage level basis, which really screws you guys over because now your cash reserves and your cash flow is impacted on keeping
Yeah.
your people productive.
Yeah, it's no secret. I mean, cash flow in comics is scattershot. I mean, for us, we've never taken on a large investment. You know, we only took on a little bit of investment capital to start. And so we've always run on very thin margins as a company and built our library. I mean, there are companies that luckily have taken on a lot of money and might be able to be okay, you know, in the long term. So for us, it's always getting creative and making sure we're ahead of the curve. But yeah, when you don't get paid what you're owed, obviously, then it becomes the trickle down effect. So you know, we're trying to find ways to continue to operate at full capacity or as close to full capacity as we can right now.
So when you're saying you're operating as close to full capacity as possible, Zenescope writers and artists are still turning in scripts and pages?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're not we're not going full throttle on all of our books right now. Some books have stopped. The books that were already going, we continued with, so they can get to print as soon as we can. Our printer opens back up, which I think is the end. I think end of this month. They're out of Quebec area, so depending on how they kind of things unfold there. So yeah, I mean, some of the stuff, yes. Some of the covers, yes. The cover art we have going, but yeah, we've stopped shop on some other way. You know, the independent contractors that we use to do the artwork, which is, you know, all of our artists and all the industry artists are independent contractors. So that stuff's, unfortunately, that stuff's come to a halt for the most part for most companies. So, and we do have some scripts still coming in. We've actually had like guys who write for us tell us that they want to continue writing and not worry about paying them on time. We've had other books that we just put a halt on. So it's, you know, it's an interesting mix for us. Like, we still have employees in the office. We are allowed to stay operable as a company based in Pennsylvania. If you're a publishing house, you are considered essential. So we do have some people going into our warehouse. We do have people going into the office to run our virtual cons we've been running. So we've been doing a lot of that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, but again, getting back to that whole, you know, weakest link in the chain, the distribution chain there, even if your printers open up and your offices stay open, and I know that there are comic book stores in places like Arkansas. I talk with Michael Tierney every 2 weeks on our retailer summit meeting. He's open. Their state has not closed them down. Right. He has no new material. So even if you can produce and he can sell, you know, when I talked to Michael last time, he talked about when he opened up nearly 40 years ago, Diamond wasn't the only player, and he had to fill out, between two stores, he had to fill out 6 orders, and it got to be a pain. It was nice to fill them all out at one place. I think a lot of retailers feel the same way. They want to get all their books out of one catalog, but there's only one place that does that. And even if they can get, you know, the books straight from Zenescope or straight from Alterna or straight from Arcana, I'll start with A or Z apparently.
Oh yeah, well most companies start with A. If you ever start a comic book company, it's going to start with A because they want to be in the front of the catalog. We didn't get the memo on that when we started Zenescope. So.
Well, you know,
but we've made it 15 years.
Forward.
Yeah, we didn't do that on purpose anyway, but we didn't even think of it. I think there's like 50 comic book companies that start with A. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, Absolute's the last one I've seen that doing that. And I think they're probably even closer now to the front than the other people. But say that your printer gets back in business by the end of the month. The latest I've heard from Diamonds is that there's no new solicitations until August.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Is that what you've heard as well?
Yeah, that sounds right.
So
yeah, it's not ideal.
That's a really huge non-publishing gap from April to August. I mean, some of the books that are out there for self-help books about breaking habits, that they say, you know, it's 21 days to break a habit and 90 days to establish a habit.
Yeah.
This is way longer than 21 days. People who had a habit of buying comic books are going to realize I have money and I haven't missed things. Or, I mean, some of them are going to be the diehard people who, they've got to get their next Grimm, they've got to get their next Wonderland. But your casual readers, it's going to be hard to get them back.
Yeah, it's scary. We don't know. We don't know what to expect. We don't know what's going to happen with the readership. The convention, on top of that, it's beyond that. It's also the convention circuit where we're all able to get new fans. So beyond not being able to really publish for a while, and losing stores to carry your books, and also not having the convention scene, so it's like a triple, sort of problem. So we're gonna have to wait and see for a little while, and then either figure out a way to just continue. If our printer opens up and Diamond still can't distribute, but the comic stores are staying open, then we got to figure out that route and go, okay, well, we can ship to directly to retailers if we have to. And that's just a wait and see. We don't know yet. I don't know if our printer is opening up, and our printer prints, probably 70% of the industry. So, once that happens, I don't know, if we're going to move forward printing books and then just sell. We do, obviously we have our website does a lot of our business for us, web sales and the convention market. So now 2 of those 3 are down. So luckily we do have a strong hardcore fan base that still comes to our website to order their books on a monthly basis. We just don't have those stores. And unfortunately for the stores, they don't have that income either. So there is that problem as well. But if fans, if we can start printing again, I don't know what we're going to do as far as like moving forward, because you want the stores to be able to profit. You want the stores that have supported you over the years to be able to maintain, stay in business. So you don't want to go around them either.
True. I mean, it's one thing to go to the website for like an alternative cover that you can't get in the store. You got the C-rated covers, which are
right.
Definitely eye-popping. We go to Wizard World every year and set up a table, and we're almost always next to somebody who does covers for Zenescope, so we get some nice traffic out of that.
Right, good.
And some great conversation with the guys who are doing it too.
Yeah, and girls, we have a lot of female artists. Yeah.
And usually a cosplayer at the table. So, thank you.
Perfect.
I guess one silver lining, every silver lining has a cloud. My son always reminds me, is that this pause gives publishers a chance to reevaluate some of the things that were going on in the industry, and perhaps relaunch some things with enough time to put some real thought behind it. Comic book sales have been kind of slumping over the past, several years. If you look at like the Comic-Con numbers, the dollars are higher, but the unit numbers are different.
Yeah.
So, you can only keep raising the price of a cover so much before people start getting a cognitive dissonance over what they're getting for their money. Is there anything going on at Zenescope right now where you're saying, hey, when we come back, let's come back with this to draw in, all the new readers that we need to recapture?
Well,
I think you're going to still continue what you were doing, but is there some new thing?
We are already, what's funny is before this happened, we had restructured our releases a little bit already. We were starting to delve into doing more one shots. Oh, sorry about that. I don't know if you guys hear these beeps. We were doing more one shot. We were planning more one shot issues, or more like short arcs with larger page counts. We were going to switch some things up this year toward the latter part of the year anyway, because we found when we do the shorter arcs with more story, maybe go a little bit of a higher price point, but they're getting more pages, more page count. So we had done a few like 3-issue arcs with 28 pages of content. those seem to sell better for us anyway. And then doing the one shots for, maybe a 60 to 80 page, almost a short graphic novel, of one of our series. That was more what we were thinking of doing to kind of shake things up and to get newer readers involved in our books, to make it easier than these longer arcs. And we were going to see how that went and be able to continue our main series that way. So that might be something we're going to continue to look at. We may or may not have to cut a couple. We usually publish 7 to 8 titles a month. We may cut a couple back. I don't know. I mean, right now, there's no plan to. It all comes down to how this shakes out. But yeah, I mean, we were already sort of planning that. And we also started realizing like there's a really big market for ways to reach people virtually. We've done 2 virtual conventions already this year. We did one in March. We're doing one this whole weekend. We started it on Wednesday. So we feel like there is an untapped market of virtual cons that we can start kind of self-producing and doing ourselves. I mean, it's going to be hard to do it as like a real comic convention. I mean, even though we're having artists come on and creators come on, we're doing panels. We're doing a Return to Wonderland reunion panel tomorrow with the original artists and writers. We're doing a writers panel on Saturday. So it's ways to get like creators together for fans to interact with, which is cool. But like, I don't know if there's a way to do that in the industry where you have a real feel of a Comic-Con. That's a little bit of a tougher sell.
Sure. Yeah, there's nothing like actually being in front of the person and getting them to sign your book.
Yeah, I think it's signatures. Yeah, of course. And the cool thing is like when we're doing the virtual cons, like out of our office back in Philadelphia, we will have like because Joe, my business partner, out there anyway, and so he'll do a signing as we're selling books. But it's still, you're not able to get artists to sign it. You're not able to get everybody to kind of, and I think that is the big part of like Comic-Con is meeting creators face to face, and we're not going to see that this year. That's gone. That nobody. There's no way there's going to be a comic convention the rest of this year. I don't even think like even New York or I highly doubt it. So yeah, that's going to be a big blow to the industry.
I agree. I think it's the Wizard folks are probably going to get hit really hard this year, and probably going to be reflected in the prices of tables and tickets next year when they do come back.
Well, Wizard, yeah. I mean, Wizard, the thing with Wizard, yeah, they weren't even really a comic book convention anymore anyway.
So we get in St. Louis.
I think the guys like Fan Expo, Reed, those guys, I mean, the guys who run Comic-Con in San Diego, I mean, obviously those are all going to, I don't know what's going to happen next year. Even when things, I'm sure by next year we'll start seeing those conventions coming back. I don't know how fans are going to be affected. Are fans going to want to go to a big convention? I'm hoping people kind of just still want to go and not worry about, hey, like there's 100,000 people here. Are we going to get sick? Yeah. Hopefully by then we have some sort of better treatment, some sort of better understanding of what's going on. Maybe there's a vaccine that's coming in the shorter term rather than longer term. If they're saying maybe it's 18 months, I don't know. I mean, it could take longer. So a couple of months
of hot weather would be helpful.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns now, and I think that's what's scary on top of the fact that a lot of people are dying. So there's so many unknowns, and I think that's for every business. I mean, anybody who has a business right now is being affected.
True. You mentioned one of the things you're looking at doing as far as handling your books coming back out is the shorter story arc. And I'm glad to hear that because, and I'd love to see some publisher experiment with that and see whether or not it's as successful as I think it would be. Because I've been, going through back issues right now because that's all I can get my hands on. There are no new comic books. And I'm reading things from the 70s, like like an issue of Superman with Kurt Swan, or even a piece of a miniseries, and it was like 22 pages, a lot of story, and it was beginning to end complex and no continuation. And I contrast that to today, where it's like, you know, we're not getting issues of a comic book, we're getting chapters of a graphic novel in a serial format.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Zenescope specifically, but across the board. And then you end up, you know, even larger now when you get writers getting 100-issue contracts for a single, you know, running story arc. That's just nuts.
Yeah.
So, you know, the shorter story format, even if it's a 4-issue miniseries, is something I think the industry would really welcome back onto the shelves.
Yeah, I don't know what works for other publishers. I know for us, like, I think, like, we used to try to do 6-issue story arcs. We've tried 12-issue story arcs. And some of them, and they can work. I mean, we've usually been in this area of the 5-issue story arc, but you're right. It's like an episodic. It's like, there's something to be said for that format. I think for us, it just makes more sense to do these shorter arcs maybe in a one shot. Like I said, like maybe it could be we had a few different ideas. We already were kind of going to start rolling out, like I said, later in the year, and we thought people would take to it because it would be an easier way to pick up a book, get a full story in that one issue. You know, yeah, you might be paying a little bit more for that book, but you're getting a lot more story and content. And it's just an easier way to get those new readers, because we all know in this industry, in the comic book industry, when I first came in, I had no clue. Like Joe and I didn't really come from a comic book background. We were like learning on the fly. I didn't know the industry at all, but like you'd get your orders for number 1 issue, and then, you know, you'd see those orders, you know, and maybe especially early on when we were doing like Grimm or Once Upon a Time, Grimm or Wonderland. You know, even back then when we would get a big order for a number 1 issue, maybe it was 10,000, maybe sometimes it was 12,000 through Diamond. You know, number 2 issue would sink down to like a 5,000, and then number 3 would be a 3,000. So you couldn't maintain those numbers as you went because the way that retailers ordered. And then Diamond introduced something called FOC, which is final order cutoff, like years back, still when I was still editor-in-chief of the company. Final order cutoff allowed retailers to then adjust their orders the week we went to print. And then that we started seeing those numbers dip even more, which, you know, it never really helped the smaller indie publishers. It may have helped Marvel, DC, and the big guys like those two, but like the smaller publishers started getting kind of squeezed on their numbers. So that didn't really help the industry very much.
Let's address that then, because, you know, we talked about what Zenescope would be doing to pull in new readers. What are you going to be doing for, you know, when these retailers get back, they're really going to be paring things to the bone for their orders. What is Zenescope thinking of doing to make themselves more appealing to the retailers as far as a comic book provider? I hear a lot of talk about returnability coming back and being a factor. I
mean, we'll see what happens with Diamond. I don't know if that'll fly or not. Returnability, for those who don't know, retailers can't return the single issues. Bookstores can return graphic novels, but retailers can't return single issues. So I don't know. I mean, we're going to have to see where those numbers are at and how those get paled back. And you know, again, for us, it's always going to start with, you know, we've always done a pretty good job of having good relationships with retailers, and we've always, since we started Zenescope 15 years ago, we've always had whether it was Joe and I initially, or as we grew, had a salesperson calling all the retailers and kind of making relationships with those retailers to try to carry our books. Some just won't carry Zenescope because they don't think it would sell, or some won't carry indies because they don't think indies will sell. I've talked to a bunch of retailers who only will carry mainstream books like Marvel, DC, or some of the Image stuff, or whatever movie or TV series on there. We have a TV series on the air called Van Helsing on Sci-Fi Channel. I mean, the sales of that book got some bump, but it wasn't bumped to the levels that I think we would have hoped. You know, so for whatever reason, there is always that reluctance for some stores to ever carry anybody other than those main publishers.
I was going to ask you about whether or not Zenescope had any kind of media plans for their characters, and you mentioned Van Helsing on Sci-Fi. I did not tie those two together. I knew there was a show, Van Helsing on Sci-Fi, and I knew that you had
Van Helsing.
Yeah, Van Helsing book. I did not know they were the
They
same.
are tied. Yeah, it's based. Like, it's funny because on Sci-Fi, if you watch the show on Sci-Fi, you might not ever notice because, I mean, as Joe and I are listed as producers, no one's really paying attention to opening credits. And then Zenescope comes in at the end. But on Netflix, we are in the opening credits. So if you're watching on Netflix, you might notice it's based on the Zenescope comic. Now, I will be the first to tell you the comic book and the TV series are very different. A lot changed in our development of the TV series, from the comic book to getting it on air. A lot changed. So, yeah, there might not be that connection where people go, well, I feel like I'm reading the comic and watching the TV show, and it's similar like The Walking Dead would be. You know, so that also can hurt. But yeah, I think the next thing we get out on air, we already know the sort of the mistakes we made with the first one, to not make with the second one.
And you know, some of the stuff that Zenescope puts out would make great mature HBO kind of titles. I'm not talking mature like the TNA kind of thing.
Right.
Obviously, you've got the very beautiful women in the very scantily clothes on some of the covers, which, you know, it sells. It's the market.
Yeah.
But something like Wonderland, where you would have just that gory horror kind of thing, would seem like a perfect fit for an HBO Max kind of deal.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we came close a few times with Wonderland. We had a pilot script written by a writer named Steven Susko, a friend of ours, who we became friendly with after he came on, but he's another Philadelphia native. He wrote a movie called The Grudge back in 2002, I think.
Sure.
And he wrote the pilot to our Wonderland series, Return to Wonderland, which was one of the best scary, like creepiest pilots I had read in a while. And I had that feel of like, Haunting of Hill House. Is that the name of it? Yeah. Had that vibe to it. Now, this was written before that show had come out, but similar vibe to like an American Horror Story season 1. But with the Alice mythology, the Wonderland mythology tied in. And it really dealt with insanity, like the idea of mental illness in families. And you know, we had it set up a couple places, and you know, with how TV and film work, unfortunately, you know, even though we came very, very close to getting a pilot ordered with a network about 2 years ago, it fell apart in the 11th hour, and now it's back to square one. So, I mean, that happens a lot. I mean, I'm out here doing that film and TV thing for a few years full time now. And it happens a lot. We constantly are developing, and we're constantly taking projects out to pitch. And I can name you a dozen or more, and tell you the many times that, you know, you're rolling that rock up the hill, and then it just rolls back down sometimes unexpectedly. And that's not all bad news. I mean, we do have some good news on the horizon that I can't yet talk about, but you know, I do feel like we'll get something. And unfortunately, I was saying to Joe earlier in this year, I was like, oh, 2020, we're going to be golden because we have a couple really great things lined up. And then this happened. So now I don't know where things stand.
The good news is that everybody's at a standstill. So it's just the world's on pause. It's not.
Well, yeah. And that's the other thing. Like, I have friends in the industry who've had their stuff like greenlit, and then this happened, and now they're afraid that those projects might never happen. So you never know. Yeah, it's hard to.
Serenity Q in the chat is saying it's a shame no one has picked up the Zenescope library for television. Netflix needs to get in on their stuff.
On their shiz. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Netflix actually, Boom just signed a first look deal at Netflix. I know that. We've had some discussions with some networks or some studios. So we're hoping that we'll get there. I think it's raising our profile a little bit more. We get kind of in this, sometimes I think, well, maybe more for the industry and people in the comic book industry especially, but sometimes it could happen. I assume in the LA industry, in the Hollywood game, is the idea that Zenescope just publishes sort of like this, we're like the Maxim of comic books. Even though, yeah, Maxim's probably a better comparison than I say like Playboy, because we're not really doing any nudity, but like the Maxim of comics without content. And, people don't realize that sometimes, yeah, the covers need to appeal. We have the variant covers. So the variant covers are limited edition covers for a certain audience. And it's funny is some of the audience who buys them are female. A lot of the audience that buys them are female. But beyond those, like, risque or sexy or variant covers, we have the regular covers and the regular storylines of a lot of genre, action, sci-fi, horror storylines. So for us, there's always that uphill sort of battle of like, hey, we're not just doing sexy covers, we're doing cool stories too. Just give one of these books a chance. I understand sort of the stigma that goes along with it. It's going to happen. But as a comic book publisher, you need to have a competitive advantage over other publishers, and that's our competitive advantage. It's been our competitive advantage for 15 years. Nobody can compete with us in the variant market right now.
Brian Tarosky's asking, did the Grim Tales of Terror movie fall through? And that's the title I was going to bring up.
Tales of Terror. No, it's not. It's with Jack. It's with Jack Heller. Jack and us have been working on two projects. Three. I can't keep track. Two projects with Jack. Jack's a friend. He has produced movies such as Bone Tomahawk. If you've seen that, if you haven't seen it, rent it tonight because it's freaking phenomenal. It's a Western horror movie with Kurt Russell, and it's so good, and people never saw it. I mean, some people have. Obviously, it did well it was a straight to VOD release. I think it had a limited theatrical, but it has Kurt Russell, Jack from Lost. I can't think of his name, the actor. But Lily Simmons. It's really good. But Jack produced that. He produced a movie called Brawl in Cell Block 99 with Vince Vaughn a few years ago. He's doing a bunch of stuff right now. So we partnered with Jack to do a Grim Tales of Terror feature. The script is on a rewrite right now. So that's where it's at. We just haven't moved forward on it yet. And then we were working on a second script with Jack of another title we published that's not in our Grim universe, because we have two sort of segments of our company. We have the Grim universe stuff that kind of involves our female badass characters like Robin Hood, Van Helsing, Sela, if you guys follow the Wonderland stuff, Neverland stuff, all that grim fairy tales centric stuff that we've reinvented. And then we have our other sort of arm of the company that does more original titles that aren't in a shared universe, that are more standalone, like the horror stuff. So we have one of those titles that we developed a script for that sort of took precedent over the Tales of Terror script. So we kind of, because the script was so good and didn't need as much work, we kind of leapfrogged Grim Tales of Terror for this particular project that we're hoping. And I was hoping that this was the year that we would actually get it go, like in production. I'm still hoping that way, but like it's going to be delayed, obviously.
Yeah, Tales of Terror was one that I thought would have been a natural for something like Netflix, because it's the anthology kind of series. So Dark Tales of the Dark Side thing. You don't have to have a contiguous what happened last episode, what happens next episode. It's this is the episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Come back
Yeah.
next week to play something new.
We were hoping to. I mean, they redid Tales from the,
Tales from the Crypt?
Was it Tales from the Crypt? Or, I'm sorry, Shudder's doing something with Creep Show. That's what it is.
Okay.
So they had a Creep Show on Shudder that friends of ours, our old entertainment managers produced. So Creep Show is a similar concept. And then they were going to do, I think they were going to remake Tales from the Crypt with M. Night. But I don't know if that's still going or not. Then they tried the Twilight Zone stuff with Jordan Peele, and I don't know where that is. I know they released a first season of it on, I think it was one of the streamers. So yeah, you'd think there's a little bit of a hunger. I don't know, I don't know if we would pivot and do TV. We'll have to see where Jack and he wants. We were setting this up as more of a franchisable film project where we can have the first movie sort of establish a lot of the mythology behind it, and then each feature could kind of showcase one of the stories from the comics. Yeah. That's what the hope is right now.
But yeah, you get the information out there in front of as many eyes as you can, and they learn that it's a comic book and they want the comic book. I don't care if a retailer doesn't normally carry indies. The comic book retailers I've talked to, the way they order is, what are people talking about? What are they asking for? If a guy's asking, you have one or two people asking for a comic book, then that's pretty much representative of a dozen people who aren't asking for it but would buy it if it was there. They'll add it to their catalog list.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some great stores supporting us over the years, and I've gone into stores, or we've done signings at stores, or that carry like our entire library, and they tell us it's some of their best-selling stuff. It's just some of the stores are stubborn, some of the stores don't. We've gotten this a lot. I don't read your book, so I don't carry your books. We used to get that all the time. It's sort of the comic book snob answer to like, hey, I read these books and I'll carry these books, and I'm not going to carry Zenescope because I don't read Zenescope. And it's kind of been a frustration going, well, you're running a business. Who cares if you read it? Like, you're going to put it on your shelf and it'll sell for you. That's always been an argument with some of the retailers. Others get it. Others go, you know what, your stuff sells. They might not even read it, but they know it sells. And then we have retailers who love our stuff and read it and sell it. So, we've always prided ourselves on having a big female readership, and even though we've gotten that stigma of going, oh, you guys are just doing Maxim and TNA and blah 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 blah. That's not true. I mean, and the funny thing is, we have such a big female readership. We've heard from so many female fans who go, I went into a comic book store with my boyfriend. I didn't know what to look at, and I saw Zenescope, and that was the one book I wanted to read. So we've always told retailers, like, hey, like, put us on your shelf, and I think you're going to sell. And some get it and some don't.
I always thought it was funny when, you'd hear the old discussions, and this is going back, 20, 30 years ago, when they'd be like, we got to put out comic books that will attract girls. We're not attracting the female market. I'm like, you know what? If you put out a good story, everybody will want to read it. I'll read the letters pages of these back issues. I see letters pages in the 70s and 80s of superhero titles. They're coming from men. They're coming from women. Everybody was reading them. It wasn't just being exclusively marketed to, man babies in their mom's basements. It wasn't
right. Well, the industry's evolved too. I mean, it has in so many ways. I mean, there's something for everyone now, which is great. I mean, you can find whatever you want in the industry now, and people are kickstarting their own projects. I think a lot of times there's that sort of like, you're finding a lot of creators trying to fit the Image mold, what they believe Image is, so they can get published through Image. Because if Image is like sort of like, oh, if I have this edgy indie book, I'll get Image will pick up my book and distribute it. Basically, become this Image is almost like they're a label, right? They're not really even a quote unquote publishing company.
They're an imprint.
They're an imprint. But you notice, like, all the image books tend to look the same, even though they have nothing to do with each other, and they can never have a shared universe. But I think, like, now you are seeing creators, you are seeing sort of a broader spectrum. So there is something for everybody, and that's just how it should be. I do think there's still a stigma with reading comic books. I'll be the first to admit, I didn't grow up a comic book fan. I was like, kind of had a stigma coming into it. Like, what, really? Like, who's reading this stuff? Like, I didn't read them as a kid. I didn't start reading comic books until we were ready to start Zenescope. And then I started binging, and I was like, holy crap. I don't know if I can curse. Holy crap.
I can, but I just try not to.
Sure. I didn't realize, and even back, that was 15, 16 years ago when we were starting things up. And my first comic I ever read was Preacher. And I said, holy shit, what is this? Like, they made
all the issues right over there on my shelf.
It's crazy. And I mean, people haven't read Preacher. I mean, it's like, it's one of the most insane, amazing comic books you could read. And I'm like, okay, I get it. And then I saw we all saw the movies coming out at that time, which was like History of Violence, I think, came out around like the early 2000s. And I was like, that's based on a graphic novel. History of Violence? Like, really? Like, what a freaking amazing movie. I have to read the comic. So we were starting to see that, for me, as coming into this industry late. And now I'm thinking, now it's like even broader. But I still feel like there's not enough people who are gravitating toward really reading the books. And I had hoped, we have the success of Walking Dead, and the success of all the Marvel movies and all the DC movies and stuff. And you were hoping, this will translate. People will start going to the comic book stores because they want to read more comics because these movies are so successful. And Walking Dead, I mean, they were selling crazy amount of comic books. But it wasn't really spilling over to the rest of the industry for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know what it's going to take to increase readership. Obviously, we're nowhere near the levels we were even in the early 90s when XMen #1 would sell 1 million copies.
Yeah.
And a New Image book would sell anywhere in the same range. I'm sure AT&T probably picked up Warner Brothers and DC Comics, and they're like, hey, we got Batman. It's selling, 50,000, 60,000 copies? What? Why are we making movies off of something that's selling?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting, it's weird because, like, even for us, like, we do, with our numbers, if you're selling, we're selling half or maybe half our number. I don't even know the numbers off the top of my head, but like, say half's direct to retailers or direct through our website, and then the rest is through Diamond. And you're hitting 6,000 units if you're lucky as an indie. 6,000 units is pretty good total. Maybe 3,000, maybe less through Diamond. We're still in that top tier of the top, whatever, 20, give or take. Whatever those guys are, whoever those guys are below, once you get out of Marvel, DC, and Image. And then, like, you got your premier guys that sell probably a little bit more market share, like Boom, because they're doing a lot of licensing, Dynamite, because they're doing a lot of licensing, like a lot of the publishers that license, and what I mean by licensing is they're, the guys doing, like, IDW, they're doing Transformers, they're doing G.I. Joe, and so those books always have a higher sales point. But if you're talking about, like, the smaller guys where we fall, like, yeah, I mean, the IP is king, even if you're only selling 6,000 units. I mean, there's companies who sell less than that, who are selling maybe 1,000 units that have gotten feature film deals,
Yes. SciFi series, 700 copies.
Yeah, I mean, I know. I'm not going to name them, but I know a couple companies. I know a company that just got a first look deal that doesn't have any penetration in the market, very little, and they got a first look deal with a company. Now, first look deal doesn't mean anything. I mean, a first look deal is nice, and it could mean something, but and it's a little money in the pocket. But at the same time, like, hey, that's a pretty big deal. Like, if you got a first look deal and you're selling 500 copies of a comic book, like, hey, more power to you. That's pretty impressive.
You sold one of them to the right person.
I mean, it's not as bad as it was like 20 years ago when some people would just print one book and take it into pitch meetings and tell people they had a comic book series, and they never even published it, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we'll do it." That's the legend of, now, don't hold me to this. I've heard the rumor that that's the legend of what happened with Cowboys and Aliens. Is
really?
That, yeah, I don't know how many they published or if it was ever even published, but there was like a bidding war because they had like the first issue printed and then took it into studios, and then there was a bidding war on it. So that was back in like the late 90s, I think.
Are you familiar with Lou Scheimer and the Filmation animation companies?
No.
They did like Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids and all that. They got their start in the late 60s with Superman, doing the Superman short cartoons. They were like, these 6-minute shorts.
Sure.
So, Lou Scheimer and his partner, they didn't have the animators yet. And, I can't remember the guy's name from DC. He wrote Miracle Monday. He wrote all kinds of Superman stories. But he was coming by and says, "Hey, I want to see your outfit, and if I like it, then we'll give you the Superman contract." Lou Scheimer and folks at Filmation hired actors to play the role of animators, and they were just sitting there doing nothing but looking busy while DC is walking through and says, "Oh, you got a nice shop here. A lot of people working." That's
great.
And one of the actors was Ted Knight, who just the up and coming Ted Knight before the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and his whole job was to say, "Hey, when we come by here, your job is to go say, 'Hey, Lou, we need to get more of this acetate paper for some,'" and that Magan, Elliot S. Magan.
Elliot S. Magan?
Magan.
Oh, Magan.
Big name in DC. So. But
man, it shows my ignorance.
Walked right past Ted and didn't stop to look. So Ted, wanting to say his line so badly because he was a struggling actor, ran after them so that he could say his lines and get paid.
Oh, really? Oh, that's funny. That's good.
So, but it's a similar thing where the fake it until you make it kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. That's how it goes.
Real quickly, you talked about the success people were having in crowdfunding. Has Zenescope looked at the Kickstarter, Indiegogo kind of thing for any of their projects? Maybe like some sort of a big book that would maybe be too risky to go direct to the market with?
I think we've done 5 Kickstarters over the course of the last several years. All of them successful. We just did one for our Grim Tales of Terror, which I wish I could have plugged already. It already happened, but we hit our goal, so it was great. So it was to print our 4th volume, because they are expensive. When we do these hardcover printings, it's super expensive to print them. So it was a smart idea for us to go, hey, we could kind of pre-sell the 4th volume and then reprint the 1st volume as well, because they're hardcover collections. So we ran a Kickstarter for those. That was the first book we Kickstarted. So we may do more of the book Kickstarting. We've done them. Our first one was back in 2012 when we Kickstarted our Grim Fairy Tales animated series. It was a pilot episode of our Grim Fairy Tales series. We Kickstarted it for 180. I think we got 186,000 for it, and made the pilot with Titmouse Studios. If you're familiar with Titmouse, they're a pretty big animation studio. And John Schnepp, who's since unfortunately passed, was one of the co-creators of Metalocalypse. He was the director of the first series, of the first episode. So we did kickstart that. We made the pilot. We had Lena Headey. We had Chris Hardwick. We had Robert Forrester. We had a bunch of cool voice actors come in, and Lena voiced our main character, Sela, in the project. So it was a big deal at the time for us, but we didn't sell it, unfortunately. And and then we kickstarted a few of our statues. So we have a few, like the Robin Hood statue. We have yeah, we've done a few of them, and we may continue to do a few more. We don't do it at the level of some other guys that only kind of operate through Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, like, the model of Kickstarter is great if things don't get better in this market with the distribution model, and if Diamond has, if there's problems with Diamond, that could be somewhere we look to do more sales through. And the good news for us is we have the ability to ship directly. We have a warehouse. We have a shipping crew. So that helps keep us a little bit more on the safe side, I think.
Yeah, you've got an infrastructure in place already.
Yeah, we have the infrastructure there, which is huge. For, I don't know, again, and I can't speak to other publishers because I don't really know their ins and outs of how they distribute or their model or their warehouse situation.
I think the last 3 years, the crowdfunding way has been, I always hear doom and gloom about the death of the comic book industry, and I'm still buying comic books. But I'm seeing that as more of a renaissance for all these up and coming people who maybe can't get into the bigger companies, and a way to show their chops and get the attention of the bigger companies, by which time they don't need them. They say, no, I've already formed my own company now. I'm doing this, and this is how I distribute.
That's what happened.
Everything out there now.
That's what happened to us in a sense. I mean, we didn't set out to become a publisher initially. We were going to try to publish through Image, or there was a company, if you remember, called Speakeasy.
Yeah.
Do you remember them? They were around when we started, and we were going to try to get published through one of those labels. And then we had so much success with the first issue of Grim Fairy Tales taken to the conventions that we just decided to self-publish. And we weren't getting accepted by anybody at the time, so we just said, screw it, let's just do it this way.
Keep all the money for yourself.
Yeah, all that lucrative comic book money.
Yeah, of course, because if you want to get rich, go into
comics. It's the get rich quick scheme no one knows about.
The only way to get rich in comics is to build a time machine, get a bunch of old dimes, and go back to 1935.
Yeah, or the 90s when they were. I talked to Brian Polito a lot, and
yeah, he's crowdfunding a lot now.
Yeah, he's back on the scene with it. He's the Kickstarter guy, because he does, he doesn't even go through Diamond.
Yeah.
I don't even think he uses Diamond. So his model's fine. He's a guy who just goes, I'm just gonna kickstart and ship direct, and and he runs a lean ship. But he he was telling me back in the 90s they were printing money with the variants.
Brian Chorosky's closing us out here with, as someone that collects pretty much only single issues, I would love to see you guys Kickstarter a hardcover of all the short stories that otherwise are only in your trade paperback, sort of like an omnibus edition. You see these big fat omnibuses out there now. We might have to. We've done those omnibuses. We've done them for Wonderland and Grim Fairy Tales. We sold out of our first volume of the Grim Fairy Tales. And then, but we still have the second volume left, and some of those left, and then Wonderland, some of them left. They're hard. They're very costly. So we have clicked around the idea of doing another omnibus through Kickstarter, because that's really the best way to do it, because you can cover a lot of your printing costs and pre-sell your book that way, and then you don't have to worry so much about, hey, like, it's going to take us however long to sell through this inventory, and then when are we going to recoup that money? So yeah, it's a good idea, and it's something we've already kind of discussed doing for some of our stuff, because people do love the omnibus collections, and it's easy, especially at conventions, because if people come to a convention and they want to read Wonderland, and they're just coming to this one convention and they want to have just everything in one, like, I just want to be able to buy it. This is what I read. I bought this I bought 50 issues for $50 or whatever the price point is. They're getting a deal already, $1 an issue in a sense, and they don't have to worry about where to begin, or the other
collection.
It's the size of the family Bible. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, it looks cool. Right. Yeah, I love them. I love the omnibus.
I'll pick up any Wonderland title you guys put out because I'm kind of partial to Alice in Wonderland. My first published novel was Alice's Journey Beyond the Moon from
Very
Tello.
cool.
So now I'm like stuck with picking up everything Alice whenever I see it. I'm like, oh yeah, I got to do that because I'm the Alice guy now.
Right.
Ralph, it's been great having you on here. I really do appreciate your time.
Anytime.
In the audience, if you like this kind of content, obviously I have to say subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. If you wanted to throw a super chat money, I'm sorry, we don't do that because YouTube doesn't let us yet. We're at 902 subscribers. You can help us in that account. But if you do want to help the site out, the easiest way to do it is just visit criticalblast.com for our reviews. Let the advertisers pay for it. If you absolutely have to have merchandise, Critical Blast is a publisher as well. And our first superhero young adult novel, Bulletproof, is available from Amazon.
That's cool.
Description.
I like that cover. Sorry.
This is gosh, I'll tell you who the artist is on that because I remember Stephen J. Mitchell was the author and Matt Flint did this cover.
Yeah, it's cool.
This is not a graphic novel, folks. This is a novel. This is words on page. It's Cody Haywood wakes up on his 16th birthday to find out that he is literally bulletproof thanks to something his father did to him as a baby with some experimental injections. Unfortunately for Cody, he has the attention span of a ferret on pixie sticks. So there's a real focus issue in becoming a superhero here that his friends have to help him through. And they've got to help him quick because there are some terrorists out there that would really love to learn how to be bulletproof, and they're not averse to getting Cody and doing what they can to make him not so bulletproof to get that secret out of him. Everybody, thanks for stopping by. Ralph, a pleasure again. Love to have you on again after things.
Yeah, anytime. Let me know. It's great being here.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.